Good afternoon, and many thanks for joining us today. To start things off, I'd like to turn it over to Cubs President of Baseball Operations, Theo Epstein, for some opening remarks.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, everyone, for being here. You know it's going to be a great day when it's only 2 in the afternoon and you're already at the Cubby Bear. Actually, before we begin, I would like to thank George Lucas and the whole staff here at the Cubby Bear for hosting us while we're under construction across the street at Wrigley. From the Cubs, I'd also like to acknowledge Chairman Tom Ricketts in the back there, President of Business Operations. You already know your way around
Absolutely,
here.
no doubt. I know where the bread is buttered.
President of Business Operations, Crane Kenny, is here as well. And over here. There we go. Man, we're really learning. And pitching coach Chris Bosio is here somewhere. Where's
the Boz man? There he is.
I'd also like to thank and acknowledge Joe's representative, Alan Nero, without whom we wouldn't be here today, and all his staff at the Octagon Agency. Thanks for being here, guys. And finally, not that Joe would forget, but I'd like to recognize and thank Joe's wife, Jay, for being here today, making the trip to Chicago to support Joe. You got to clap for that one.
Atta girl. I could have forgotten, so thank you very much. I appreciate that.
We are here on a very important day for the Chicago Cubs. We're very fortunate to welcome one of the very best managers in baseball, the person we believe will be our long-term manager and a real difference maker for us with his leadership in the clubhouse and in the dugout. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce the manager of the Chicago Cubs, Joe Maddon.
Thank you. Put it on. Oops, a little big, but it's perfect. How cool is that? Is the hat a little big? I wear the box normally.
You want to stand up and make sure?
Oh, sorry. It's been a while. Oh, yeah, absolutely, yes, please.
There you go. All right.
Thank you.
Guys.
All right.
And it's yours.
Cool. Hey, just first of all, thank you, Mr. Ricketts and the Ricketts family. Obviously, without your support, I would not be sitting here right now, and I really appreciate that. The two gentlemen up front who stole away and met me at the RV park in Pensacola, Florida. I don't know if you guys are aware of that story or not, but that's how I got to meet up with Jed and Theo. Jay and I were on a cross-country trip from Tampa over to California, and we holed up in Navarro Beach, I think it is, down near Pensacola. And that's when we finally got in touch with Theo and Jed. They came on down. We kind of sat behind the Cousin Eddie. That's our RV, the Cousin Eddie 43-foot Winnebago. And we sat back there and pretty much just talked philosophy about how this is all going to work. For me, that was the most important thing. That's what I needed to know, that we were philosophically aligned. It had nothing to do with anything other than that. I've been doing this for a bit, and I know I'm a little bit different at times. And so for me, it's really important to have that kind of support from the ownership and from the front office personnel to understand me in a sense. But I think I've had some wonderful mentors to this point. The fact that Theo and I interviewed with Jed about 10 years ago, actually, so we knew there was a lot of common ground, commonality regarding philosophy. And that's what it comes down to. I mean, you're going to ask me a lot of questions in a couple minutes, and I'm happy to answer them all. But at the end of the day, unless we're aligned perfectly, it's not going to work. It just can't work. That's the way the game has evolved to this point. The autocratic manager of the days of yesteryear are gone. It's not just about one guy anymore. It used to be about one guy. When a manager left an organization, went to another one, everything would change. Everything would change, and I always thought that was inappropriate. And I worked for some really good managers with the Angels for a long time, and then, of course, I worked with a real good manager in Tampa Bay. He was pretty solid. Nobody gets it, okay. So I've been doing it for a while. I've worked with a lot of good people, and I know that the synergy between front office and the field today in today's game is really, really that important. And it's always going to be. It's going to get even more important. So To be philosophically in line with these guys from Jump Street was important to me, and we are. And we talk about stuff already. It's so common, it's so easy. We had a great dinner last night with the Ricketts family, and it was really easy to sit there and absorb the conversation and feel like, I really fit in here. This is a good fit for me personally, and it's not about me, but it is in the sense that I feel comfortable here. Beyond all that, and then I'll get to the questions, I just want to tell you a couple quick things. We played here this year with the Rays. That was my first experience at Wrigley Field ever. I had ridden my bicycle around it, but that was it when I was with the Angels. One of the games, I don't know what game it was, first, second, or third, whatever. I'd taken a picture out of the game, and I'm walking out to I go out to the mound, get the ball, give it to the next guy. I'm walking back in, and you have to understand something about your ballpark. I think you do, but it is magical. I'm walking back in, and I'm looking up at the sky. It's perfectly blue. I mean, not kind of blue, perfectly blue. And the rafters, the way you have your light standards set up there, and the people themselves in the stands. And I really had this flashback to Gladiator. Like this computer-enhanced situation that's perfect. It was this perfect moment. And I really, there's times I tell myself, shut up and just, watch what's going on and observe what's going on and really appreciate the moment, because we have a tendency in our lives to go through moments quickly. So I did. I slowed it down. And I'm telling you, that ballpark is magical. And I'm really, really excited about being there next year. And I understand, I know you guys get it, but I'm telling you, from my perspective, that was a first for me to go in there and see that. So that really struck me. The other thing that struck me was the talent on the field for the Cubs. I'd heard all about it. You read about it. You see it. You watch. I don't really watch ESPN and all that stuff often, but once in a while I'll catch a glimpse of that. And you'll see the Cub players. And then you get to see them firsthand. And then when I'm watching all this, the thing that really strikes me is the player development program and also the scouting. It's got to be outstanding. It has to be. To get that kind of group here working off the same sheet of music, looking like they do, I was really, really impressed with all that from the other dugout. So these are the kind of things, and I could go on, as you can already imagine, but the two things that really stood out from this past summer to me were obviously this cathedral across the street, and then and beyond that, the groupings of players, youthful, talented, really into the game, really tough games. Really, they never quit. It was beautiful to watch, and the fact that it struck me that a lot of good stuff has been going on here philosophically regarding your scouting and development, and I really want to commend the scouting and development department. I have not met most of these guys, although I know a lot of guys through history with the Cub organization, but you guys have done a great job. We've done a great job. So as it moves forward, that's the stuff that was apparent to me, and you can tell I'm pretty excited about being here. And the other thing, your city's wonderful. I love Chicago. Been here, sporadically as a visitor, but to hang out downtown, I want to live somewhere downtown. I like the energy, I like the vibe, love it. I like the energy. I'm not going to hide. I don't want a gated community. I don't want to live on a country club. I want to be right in the middle of everything. I want to feel everything. And I think when you do that, you really are able, and I did say do, babe. And I really think that you're able to connect with the whole group, and I'm really excited about all that. So there you go. That is my opening statement.
Great. Thank you, Joe. We do have wireless microphones circulating, so please wait for a mic to ask your question, and please state your name and affiliation before doing so.
Bruce Levine from WSCR. I'm always supposed to say, welcome to Chicago, because I've done it 18 times, and I hope
It's good to see
you're
you.
going to be here for a long time.
Thank you.
Good to see you. What was the selling point as far as the situation as far as when you're going to compete, when you're going to win, when they're going to have the money to spend to take it to the next level?
Honestly, the selling point, see, I believe that's all going to happen. They don't have to, nobody has to sell me on that. I've been in baseball for a bit. I'm pretty good at observing things. I know that's going to happen. The selling point are the people. You have to be aligned with people that you want to be aligned with. You have to want to show up every day and want to work with a certain group of people. That matters more than anything. There's not enough money in the world to make you want to work in a situation or a place that you don't want to be and really be productive or good. So for me, the selling point are these two guys, ownership, Now your players that I'm going to get to know. Boz is here. I've done battle against Boz in the past as a minor league manager when he was a player. The staff, the players, all that's the selling point. I'm really both patient and confident. I think I get that from my dad. So regarding like how long this may take, I'm not sure. But what I saw on the field works. What I saw on that field this year, I know works. So for me, it's about getting to spring training, getting to know everybody, building relationships, developing trust. When you get all that stuff working, man, then really magical things can happen. So that's where I'm at with this whole thing. It's more about people and connections. The other stuff's going to take care of itself because if you have talented players, which we do, and you put them in the right environment and you set up a situation, to me, where they're not afraid of making mistakes. That's the most important thing. I want any player that plays for me or for us to never be concerned or worried about making mistakes. That's the worst thing you could do. To coach aggressiveness out of a player, to coach fear into a player, those are the two worst things you could possibly do. So I'm going to get to know all that stuff, but I'm telling you, and succinctly there, that's my overarching philosophy when it comes to managing or teaching or coaching, are those two really big components, and then combine that with good people.
Hey, Joe, Phil Rogers with MLB.
Phil, how you doing, man?
Very good. When your Rays went to the World Series in 2008, they improved by about 30 games from the year before.
Correct.
How did you do that, and how does this situation parallel that one?
I'll give you the cliff notes on that. You know, I'm a bike rider, so we were living out in Brea, California. That's where I thought you had to sell 30 more wins to your team after a team that had lost 100 and almost 100 games 2 consecutive years. That's where I came up with 9 = 8. 9 players playing 9 innings hard would put us as among one of the 8 teams in the playoffs going to the dance. So the selling point was at that time to get 9 more wins out of the offense, 9 more wins out of the defense, and 9 more wins out of the pitching staff, just to have them collectively think in those terms. I think when you're trying to make like these quantum leaps, you have to. I'm always into simplifying. I should also say that. So when you're trying to get something done, and I guess 9 = 8 sounds complicated, but it's actually rather simple. So you're trying to simplify things with your players. You're going to simplify them. You're going to present a program or a plan to them that they can understand and grasp onto and say, this can actually work. So it was all about presenting a realistic, not unreachable kind of a game plan going into that season. I remember it really, really well because I'd spent a lot of time thinking about that, and I really got to spring training that year and really wanted our guys to understand that. And I thought that would put us at 92 wins, I think it was at that point, which I thought would get us into the playoffs, and it did. I think we won more than that. But it's at the end of the day, man, I briefly touched about the trust component. When you're doing something like we're doing here, the trust has to go both ways. It has to flow both sides. And when I'm here to tell the players that may be listening, you got my trust already. I have to earn the trust of the players on the field. The staff, we have to earn the trust of the players on the field. Once you've established the trust and they believe we know what we're talking about, and they know that we think that they're good, some really special things can occur. So we could sit here and talk mechanics, hitting mechanics, base running, whatever you want, but it really comes down to personal relationships and trust. And because what happens then, when you get to that point, now you could really have constructive criticism flowing back and forth. And when you get to that point, that's where really good things can occur. Because you have to have thick skin to play this game. You cannot be thin-skinned and play this game and be successful. So those are the kind of things I glom onto. So going into the spring training, I'll promise you I'll sit down for a bit before I address the team for the first time. But it's going to be very similar to what we're talking about right now. And once we establish trust and you open these lines of communication, anything is possible.
Joe.
Yo.
Joe, John Reyes and Reyes
What am I missing? I'm missing. Okay. Hi, John.
Based on your philosophy, when you look at the core youth of players that we have, can you tell in your mind when they may maximize their base talent to get you where you want to go?
It's hard to be highly specific. Just utilizing my experience, you look at a group of players like we have here right now, and in my mind's eye, first of all, I know it's going to happen. I know we're going to be very successful with this group of players, and whoever we're going to augment them with, whether it's free agency, other guys coming up from the minor leagues, acquisitions, whatever. So for me, you never want to put necessarily an absolute finish line on anything, because then you're setting yourself up for disappointment. Absolutely. So the point is, from my perspective, being an old scout, being trained by some really good scouts historically and knowing what's going on in today's game, I'm just saying just be a little bit more patient. That's what I'm saying. Just be a little bit more patient. Let us get our program in there. Let us get our program involved and support these kids, which I know we do here. It shouldn't be in too far in the future. I don't see it being too. Listen, for me, I'm going to be talking playoffs next year, okay? I'm going to tell you that right now, because I can't go to spring training and say any other thing. I'm just incapable of doing that. Why would you even report? It's all about setting your standards, your goals high, because the problem, if you don't set them high enough, is that you might actually hit your mark, and that's not a good thing. So we're going to set our mark high, absolutely. And I'm going to talk playoffs. I'm going to talk World Series this year. I promise you, I am. And I'm going to believe it. And I'm going to see how this is all going to play out. And it's within our future. There's no question about that. But I don't know exactly when that's going to happen. But in my mind's eye, we're going to make the playoffs next year. And that's how I'm going to approach next season.
Joe, I'm David Kaplan from Comcast Sportsnet.
Where am I looking?
Right here.
Okay.
And 87.7 The Game. There have been a lot of great managers who have sat in that seat and haven't gotten it done in
Right.
106 years.
Beautiful.
Do you have any idea what the hell you've gotten yourself into?
I love it. I actually love it. The challenge is so outstanding. How could you not want to be in this seat? I know Lou. Me and Lou are good. Fabulous. Dusty, great guy. And the whole point is, that was then, this is now. I don't know all the circumstances surrounding that moment or the last 107 years, whatever it's been. This is a 107-year opportunity for me right now, or 108 years, whatever it's setting at right now. So I'm way too optimistic to worry about things like that. I'm kind of pragmatic in a good way, I think. I don't focus on stuff like that. I refuse to. After all, you would have never been the manager of the Devil Rays in the first place if you thought that way. So I like the challenge. I think the challenge is fabulous. I've been preceded by some really outstanding baseball people, and so have these guys. As I know the guys that have been in these seats before also have been tremendous baseball people. But at the end, why would you not want to accept this challenge in this city, in that ballpark, under these circumstances, with this talent? It's an extraordinary moment, not just in Cub history, but in baseball in today's game. This confluence of all these items coming together at the same time is pretty impressive. Listen, you're going to hear me say the same thing next year and the year after that and the year after that, I promise you, because I believe what I'm telling you right now. You may not believe me, and that's cool because we don't know each other that well yet. But this is what I believe. And I've been there before. I think I know it works. This is a whole different set of circumstances. This moment, what is it, November 3, 2014, is an entirely different moment than any moment that's preceded it. And it's up to us to capture this moment and project it forward like we think we can.
Jesse Rogers, ESPN here. Actually, for
Hi, Jesse.
Theo, what specifically separates Joe from other managers?
I think it kind of speaks for itself here. No, Joe is he's a combination of just about everything that we look for in a manager. I think everyone associates him with new school because they've used analytics in Tampa, and he's so open-minded and so progressive. But this is an old school baseball guy right here with a wealth of knowledge, and just kind of reminded of that over these last few days talking baseball. He could, coach any position on the field, and it's hard to find that. It's hard to find old school and new school in the same package. And, comparing Joe now to when I interviewed him over a decade ago, he's got the confidence that comes with, he was always confident, but I think it's now reached a new level because he's done it and it's worked. And he knows he can connect. He knows that all he has to do is be himself and he can lead. All he has to do is be himself and he can connect with players. All he has to do is be himself and he can win. So it's just about everything we're looking for in a manager, and that's why we feel like he's our long-term fit as a leader.
Theo and Joe, right over here. George Hoffman with the News Radio WBBM. For both of you, how do you handle the possible blowback from your brethren as to how this came about? Not that it wasn't above board, but that you had to get rid of a manager who you had for 1 year who would improve the club to get another guy?
Yeah, I'll start.
Go ahead.
And we addressed this a lot on Friday, but we were caught with a dilemma on our hands, and in reconciling that, we had to think about ultimately what my responsibility is, and that's always to do the right thing for the Cubs organization as a whole. I think we owe it to our fans to always try to have the best, and it's a very, very unique opportunity when someone like Joe Maddon becomes available. And I don't think I would have been doing my job if we didn't pounce on that. And Rick Renteria, as I mentioned on Friday, did a great job here. I really appreciate his contribution, and we were caught in a situation where we couldn't do the right thing for the Cubs and the right thing for Rick, and we decided to take the path that made the most sense for the Cubs. But Rick will go on to be an outstanding manager elsewhere, and we wish him nothing but the best. His contribution here won't be forgotten.
60's a new 40. My wife's sitting here right now, and my grandkids are in Arizona. My mom's in Pennsylvania, and I had this option to exercise a right in a contract. That's all I did. I exercised my right within that contract. And I'll tell you another thing. I didn't even know it was in there. I didn't even know I had that opt-out. Just being honest. I'm driving my RV. I went from Tampa to Hazleton, my hometown, for a golf tournament for our Hazleton Community Center back in my hometown. And I'm driving back, and Andrew tells me he's going. And then I get another phone call telling me I got an opt-out clause. I had no idea I had it. So all this stuff happened, the wheels start turning at this point, and then I research, I look at everything, and finally I'm saying, okay, even though 60 is the new 40, you still are, and moving forward, you got a family to consider, and I had to look at the whole thing. So from my perspective, all I did was exercise my right within my contract. That's all I did, and then after that, just sit back and see what may happen. So I hope that doesn't sound cold. I don't think it is, because I was totally oblivious to all of that until that moment arrived when Andrew left and this thing kicks in, and all of a sudden I have this opportunity to become a free agent. And that's exactly how it came down for me.
Joe, Jay Cohen, Associated Press, Middle.
Yo.
What can you tell us about how your coaching staff will look? Because there was a staff in place here, and are you concerned at all about working with a new group of guys maybe that you're not familiar with?
We're going to talk. Well, I know Boss. I know some of the guys over there. We're going to sit down and talk about that. Actually, some today. Again, this has been relatively fast, and I haven't really had a chance to think about a whole lot of everything yet. But of course, we're going to talk about the staff that's already in place first, and then we're going to try to draw some conclusions from that. So nothing's been finalized. But I'm pretty amenable. I work well. I think I play good in the sandbox. I really do. But at the same time, you have to have guys that are on board and understand whatever. Again, from Jed and Theo, I know that the staff that's in place, we probably could cohabitate pretty well. But we do have to sit down and talk about it and try to sift through everything. For me, a really good coaching staff, i.e. the 2002 Angels going to the World Series and winning it, a lot of that was a tremendous coaching staff. Not a lot. I mean, the players are always paramount, don't get me wrong. But, that was a great staff. And I've also been, I'm not going to mention, but some staffs that can really injure a group. So you really have to pay attention. I think too many times people just kind of dial it in there and say that any coaching staff could be good or exist. It's not true. You have to have a good mix. I'm really big on guys that just communicate well, that are able to talk to the players. Because it's not, the game seems to have evolved to this point where it's just about physical mechanics. To me, the mental mechanics so exceed the physical mechanics in teaching this game and applying this game. So when you get a coach or coaching staff that's able to ameliorate problems with players just conversationally, that matters as much as a guy that knows where to put a hitter's hands, or a lot more, actually. So all these things have to be considered moving forward, because all that stuff, to me, is a big part of developing a World Series caliber ball club.
CBS Chicago, you talked about the pressure of the 107 years, and we saw years ago in October that pressure really affected the players carrying the burden of that.
Sure.
How much do you think your personality is a perfect fit for this job to keep these players loose? We know all your antics and everything.
Don't ever permit the pressure to exceed the pleasure. Don't ever permit the pressure to exceed the pleasure. that's on the top of my lineup card every night. You know, I've been wanting to do this since I was 6. I mean, everybody that's played in the big leagues has been wanting to do it since they were like 6, 7, 8 years of age. Don't ever forget that. Don't ever forget why we're here. This is baseball. This is a game, and it's entertainment. So at the end of the day, when we're playing these games that are very meaningful in September and October, I want you to go out there, and I want them to play the game as though it were March 15th, June 15th, August 15th, and then hopefully October 15th. Don't ever change the way you play the game. If you really could get that point across with your guys, that the game never changes. Maybe your thoughts may, but if you really train yourself to play the same game regardless of the calendar, the date on the calendar, you can perform and play well in pressure moments, latter part of the season, because you've played that game all year. I mean, actually, when it gets to playoff time, I want less scouting information. I want less meetings. I want you there later. I want you doing less stuff, because it's all about keeping a fresh mind and a fresh body that helps you play and perform in those moments. I learned that quickly in the latter part of right before the year 2000. You got to go the other way, and that's what I talked about, simplifying. So for me, when you get to that moment, don't ever permit the pressure to exceed the pleasure. A. B. Simplify things and play the same game regardless of the date on the calendar.
Hey,
Yes, sir.
Sahadev Sharma, Baseball Prospectus. I believe in Tampa you had a pretty open lines of communication with the analytics department. How often did you actually use that information to implement it during games, and how long do you think it'll take you to build a rapport with the R&D group here?
I used it a lot. I mean, you ever see that card in my back pocket? That's just dripping with analytics every day. And see, the big thing about that is people don't, and Theo alluded to it, I mean, you have to be able to utilize all that's at your disposal. I'm a blink kind of a guy. I believe in intuitive thinking, but I also believe that your intuitive thinking is the product of all this other stuff that you've accumulated over a period of time, including the analytics that you just picked up 2 days ago. Or maybe it was the session I had at Gene Autry Park on the backfield with Mark McLemore in 1985. You have to draw on all those different experiences in order to come to a conclusion in that blink moment. So to me, it's not just necessarily about a number, but the numbers are really good, and they really point you in the right direction. But then again, there's human beings involved too. Sometimes when a player is not playing up to his abilities, that number means nothing. It means 0. When a player is pretty much around where he's supposed to be, that number is corresponding to what he's doing right now. I'm really into that number. And that's up to me to have to make that determination in that blink moment. So I'm really into it. I love it. It won't take me long. I've already been asking Theo and Jed questions about it. I think it's a big part of today's game. It's going to continue to grow. But again, I think you need to balance it between the human being and the number. And that's something that we're really getting into in Tampa Bay right before I left. There was that interesting leap, trying to combine a number with the person somehow, and on a daily basis, almost trying to give that number life. And again, I know that's crazy stuff, but I think it's doable. But I'm totally into it, and I use it a lot. All factors, whether you're talking about lineup creation, bullpen usage, how you're going to pinch hit. Am I going to start a runner on a 3-2 on a 3-2 count? Knowing whether the guy's a ground ball pitcher, what the strikeout percentages with this hitter versus that pitcher, all those kind of things would feed into my decision whether to start that runner or not. And I have that all in that card that's dripping with stuff in my back pocket.
Joe, you said it right here.
Okay.
John Greenberg, ESPN Chicago.
John.
You said it, this thing went pretty quick.
Yeah.
And when you met these guys, sitting with them around the campfire at the RV park.
Wasn't a campfire, but it was kind of a nice evening. It was really, like the sun was setting really well.
I like your set the scene. I was wondering
Yeah,
what exactly they said.
It was
to
the back of the Winnebago. There's like a little beach. The sun was setting. It was getting kind of cool. Theo needed a jacket. Jay ran in for a couple more beers. It was beautiful.
What did they say that really sold you? Because you said this went so quick.
Well, again, known these guys for a while. The conversation that we had the other day was not unlike, was it the Biltmore in Phoenix? The Biltmore in Phoenix 2003? I mean, honestly, I'm sitting there looking at him, and it's like, whoa, it's just like no time had passed whatsoever. Because it truly, philosophically, it's really aligned pretty darn closely. And then doing battle against Red Sox for years, and always appreciating how they had done things, and I know they appreciated how we had done things. So all that stuff is pretty simple, man. I mean, that's easy to connect with. It was very easy to connect with. So this conversation was more like a validation, verification that we've always thought pretty much the same way, and that we could coexist and make this whole thing work. So it was a relatively easy conversation, interesting conversation, and it led to this moment.
Evan Fitzgerald, Fox 32 here in Chicago. Theo, you went after the big-ticket manager this offseason. Is this kind of a signal that, as an organization, you guys are ready to do that as far as the roster as well, to make some bigger additions to complement the younger players?
Well, we didn't go after Joe because he's a big-ticket manager.
Thank you.
We went after him because he's Joe Maddon, and we think he's the right guy to lead this group of players now and for the long term. So, we've already talked ad nauseum about where we are. We believe that we're transitioning away from a 3-year period where we were essentially only accumulating young talent, and now we're competing. And I'm not saying we're all the way there. We may not peak in 2015, but we're competing. And when you're going to compete, you have to set your sights high, and we've already set our goals of the division this year, and I know Joe echoes that in the World Series. He added on top of it, which I like. But having Joe here doesn't necessarily change our plans this winter. We're out to add talent. It might make it a little bit easier. Joe's got a great reputation in the game, and I know players want to play for him. But we're growing as an organization. We're not going to speed it up because Joe is here. We're not going to slow it down because Joe is here either. We're going to continue to grow this thing organically and compete, and I look forward to that.
Hey, Joe.
Bobby, how you doing?
Doing good, thanks. Hey, when the Cubs came talking to you about the job, were you seriously considering taking a year off and going TV at all, just because it was only...
I just didn't know how it was going to happen. I mean, when we finally declared or opted out, there was several really interesting options or opportunities that all of a sudden popped up that I had not even thought about or considered. But yeah, I would have done something like that if it was necessary. But it was very complimentary. I mean, stuff just started happening, man, and it's stuff from different spots, different angles that I had not anticipated. So it was very complimentary, highly complimentary. But yeah, I mean, I could have done something like that. I can't give you a specific answer to that question because it didn't happen that way. I was just these are the stimuli I was been presented with, and then I just have to make my decision, our decision at that point. So I just feel very fortunate that at the end of the day, I'm able to sit in front of you folks here today. Under these circumstances, being the next manager of the Cubs, I can't tell you how I mean, I guess you could see how excited I am. It's a combination of that, the Cubs organization, ownership, your cathedral, the city itself, and don't forget National League Baseball. National League Baseball is very cool. In the American League, I used to take the DH out as often as I could just to play a National League game. All those things are really a whole new bunch of ballparks, different places to go, different challenges. See, I mean, you're not gonna grow just by staying put. Believe me, this is uncomfortable. This is really uncomfortable making all these decisions and making them within 2 weeks. Not comfortable, but that's a good thing. It's a good thing to get out of your comfort zone. I really don't think you're gonna grow to your maximum potentials unless you do push yourself to those limits. And so this is my personal attempt to push myself to another limit, which I think is good. And again, even though I'm just going to be 41 in next February, it's still good to provide or take on these different challenges. At the end of the day, man, it just makes everything interesting. And I like interesting. I like it a lot. I mean, I don't go to that ballpark. I won't be there for like a 7 o'clock game. I know we only play a couple of those. But I won't be there for a 7 o'clock game at like 2 o'clock or 1 o'clock. I promise I won't. I have a life outside of baseball. I don't like sitting in concrete bunkers and drinking coffee and watching TV. I'm not into that. The players don't have to be the first one there and last one to leave to impress me. Not at all. That has nothing to do with winning. Zero. As the season's in progress, I like our guys to work less and not more. I like you to take less batting practice. I think a big part of the dearth in hitting right now, offense, is the fact that guys swing too much. So there's all these different things to consider, and you wrap it all up into this one little cool package, and you're sitting, I could see the marquee out through that window right there. This is pretty special. For me personally, for my family, I feel very fortunate to be in this position.
Joe, Mark Harmon, 87-7, the game in the back here. You're going to be dealing with a lot of young players coming up. How much time, how many at-bats does it take for you to really know if a guy is ready, and how do you handle that going forward?
Well, a lot of it has to do conversationally. I mean, how does a guy react to failure conversationally? And, you know, there's the politician, there's the Eddie Haskells of the world. You have to look through that. But, I mean, truly trying to find out where the guy's coming from, what he's thinking, what does he believe in. And that's really important because I don't care about 0 for 30. I don't care about 0 for, or 2 for 25. A lot of that could be some really good hard contact. Some of that could be some bad baseball luck. So you got to really analyze exactly what's going on, what led to that 2 for 25 or whatever. 0 for 30 is a little bit extreme. All of that would be conversational. Believe me, I'm really patient. I understand development. I love development. I love the young players. I do. I really like, just trying to understand what's making this guy tick. And again, at the end of the day, you can look at him and see, is there really a high ceiling here or not? Are we fooling ourselves? And that's a conversation too. But when you get in the dugout with the kid and you really start having some one-on-one conversations and find out what really makes this guy tick, that's where you really separate the AAA player to the 4A player to the legitimate major league player. And it's what's between the ears what separates the men. Good.
All right. Thanks, everyone. At this point,
Well, can I say one more thing, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
The one thing I want to just recognize my guys back in Tampa Bay. Very grateful for all the years that I spent there. Stu and Matt and Andrew and the staff and the players. Outstanding people. And thank you for everything. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining us today.
Oh, yeah, one more thing. Where's the bartender? Bartender here? Barkeep? Anywhere? I got the drinks right now. Okay. What do I got? Round? What do I got? What Theo said I got 1 round. No, actually, I had thought about that, so 1 round's on me, please.
Welcome to MLB Tonight, the first Monday of the off-season. The guys are here. Bill Ripken and Ron Darling, Matt Yaloff. Ronnie, coming off of a thrilling postseason. Impressions of what you saw in October. Man, it didn't stop, Ron.
Well, I got to follow the Kansas City Royals, and they were just unbelievable. The wild card game really solidified it, gave them the confidence to go through not only the Angels, but the Orioles. What a great post. And when I do postseason, October, I get the Iron Man, and the rest of the winter, I got Billy.
There you go.
Ripkins all day long.
The Iron Man, by the way, was Cal.
I get that. I'm with you. It may be the off-season, but we're on top of it. And you know what? I'll tell you what. Baseball doesn't stop. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all year long. The first big move of the off-season made by the Cubbies. They introduced their new manager, Joe Maddon, Monday afternoon at the Cubby Bear. It's a bar near Wrigley. After 9 years with the Rays, Maddon moves to Chicago for a 5-year deal. He's the 54th manager in team history. He brings confidence. I think we're safe in saying that. He brings a winning pedigree and a style not often seen at the big league level. He talked about many things, including the allure of Wrigley Field.
I'm telling you, that ballpark is magical, and I'm really excited about being there next year. And I understand, I know you guys get it, but I'm telling you from my perspective, that was a first for me to go in there and see that. So that really struck me. Why would you not want to accept this challenge in this city in that ballpark under these circumstances with this talent. It's an extraordinary moment, not just in Cub history, but in baseball in today's game. This confluence of all these items coming together at the same time is pretty impressive. So listen, you're going to hear me say the same thing next year and the year after that and the year after that, I promise you, because I believe what I'm telling you right now. You may not believe me, and that's cool because we don't know each other that well yet. But this is what I believe. And I've been there before. I think I know it works. This is a whole different set of circumstances. This moment, what is it, November 3, 2014, is an entirely different moment than any moment that's preceded it. And it's up to us to capture this moment and project it forward like we think we can.
Let's be honest about something. There are people in baseball, when they talk, they sound like Charlie Brown's teacher. You tune them right out. Wah, wah, wah. He's not one of them. We listen when Joe Maddon speaks, Bill.
Well, you have to listen to it. And I like the way Joe has his way where he says something. We're not worried about the history of the Chicago Cubs. November 3rd, 2014, we control what happens today, tomorrow, the next day. He truly believes this team is going to be in contention, playoffs this year, next year, and the year after.
Well, why wouldn't he think that? He was with the Tampa Bay Rays when they could not find their way out of being in last place. And what he did, I think he's going to be the biggest free agent signing all winter. He is a game changer. He's a difference maker. He's a guy that when you go into the ball game, Billy, I know you know this, intuitively as a manager, you're trying to make decisions, right? But you make decisions with all the stuff you know, baseball-wise, and all the stuff you get, analytics, metric-wise. He is the best at putting both of those together to make those snap decisions.
Yeah, and I think that baseball sense that you're talking about during the course of the game, look, there may be a move that he makes that doesn't pan out, but it's not because it wasn't the right move. And I think when you look at Joe Maddon, there's probably 5, 10 managers out of the 30 that I could say will not be outmanaged during the course of the ball game, and Joe is certainly one of them.
Let me ask you this before we move on to what he has and what he needs. There's a baseball faction that believes Rick Renteria, the former manager, may have gotten a raw deal here. 1 year on the job, a multi-year contract, Maddon becomes available, and it's bye-bye Rick. What do you think about that?
Well, I think it's one of the biggest hang-with-him moments in recent history. We're talking about a guy that they improved 7 wins. He really was in charge of a lot of those young players. They hired him because of his ability to communicate with those young players, his ability to speak Spanish as well as English, and he did a fantastic job. But we're talking about an iconic manager is who they've gotten. I mean, this is just not one run-of-the-mill kind of manager. And remember that Renteria did well. Maddon started his career exactly like Renteria. He's a guy that was in baseball for 31 years. He paid his dues. He was a manager down in Dominican leagues. He did everything it took to get to this place. And right now at 60, he says 60 is the new 40. Yeah. I think he's in a perfect place.
Yeah, you think about this and what Renteria was able to do. Look, 1 year on the job, 3-year contract. So he's going to get paid for 2 more years. So that's kind of the good part about it. How it all kind of unfolded seemed a little to me, a little sketchy. And I think the bad thing for Rick is going to be, will a team jump out there and give him another opportunity? What's going to happen to him now in the baseball sense of it? Look, he's going to get paid for 2 more years. We get that. But how it happened, and I do think Theo, when he made the statement, he probably deserved better than this, but we tried to make this commitment to this organization, to this city in Chicago, to stand by what we need to do to win a championship. We think this is the best way to go about it. So in this case, it seems a little sad for Rick, but we're making a move and going in a different direction.
Think about this. There's so much negativity around the Cubs. Joe Maddon calls it poison tree. And I think that Maddon's the only guy that can get him out of this. He's such an eternal optimist. He's the guy that always sees the glass half full. So I think he is the perfect guy right now for this ball club.
But what does he have on the field is the question. Check this out. These are Cubs to build on. You have the ages there on opening day 2015. They're not only talented, they are young. Arrieta, Rizzo, Castro, Baez, Soler, Ronnie, you look at this list of 5. Which guy jumps out to you?
Well, Rizzo's the guy that jumps out at me. I've been able to watch him play. He's the entire package. Remember, this is a kid who's been traded twice in his career. But he also has shown that he's a leader in the sense that he's the first guy at the top step of the dugout. He's the guy that has no problem trying to go after Aroldis Chapman when 2 of those balls were thrown over a teammate's head. He was an all-star this year. That's a big deal. But I even think, more importantly, we watched Eric Hosmer play a lot in the postseason, and his glove and how important that is. Well, Rizzo is right there. He's the kind of guy that can be a difference maker on the defensive side, a well-rounded player. But why do you love him most? Well, you love him most because he's intelligent. He will bunt sometimes against that shift to get a runner on base and help his team, but really it's that power. Baseball is going through a stage right now where they have a dearth of just big sluggers who can hit the ball out of the ballpark, and he is one of them. And he's just one of those guys in Wrigley that if you're a Cubs fan, you do not go get a hot dog or go to the restroom when he's at the plate.
So he's a stop-and-watch guy is what you're saying?
Big time.
Is he a finished product?
It's not a finished product. I think he has a long way to go, to tell you the truth, and I think he's going to be one of the marquee players in the National League. But also what I like about him is I think of all those young players, he's the guy that they look up to, and I think that's important.
I know your guy is not a finished product, but my goodness, what we've seen early on is remarkable from Jorge Soler.
Yeah, I look at this guy, when you talk about all the young players they have and what he's able to do and what he looks like, might be the biggest and best of them of all. And when you look at him at 6'4", 215, I watched this swing when he first broke onto the scene, and that vicious two-hand follow-through, it reminded me of another big guy that played in yesteryear, the man from Vlad. And look at this, about the same size guy, that almost is eerie how similar they are coming out of the box. What I also like about him, unlike Vlad, is he seemed to hit everything that was in the confines of the strike zone, where Vlad might go outside the zone and do it well, by the way. But he showed me early on in his baseball career that he liked things around the strike zone and took pitches that necessarily weren't in there. So when I go back and I see that first home run he hit off of Latos, ball 1 down, that is a great take on a 1-0 slider. This is the 2-0 pitch. He said, maybe not me. And then this pitch, Ronnie, inside, that he gets the barrel to and like pushes or smashes that ball to center field, which is very, very impressive. Another at-bat I saw was here off of Miller, and that is nasty. You're not hitting that. And then from 0-2, he takes that pitch. That's a good take. He stares out at him. That is a really good take, and on a 3-2 pitch, doesn't expand on a 3-2 pitch that's in. I really liked his patience. And once again, I was talking about the man from Vlad and that pitch that he can hit right there. Look at this thing bounce. And what is it? It's a knock. He could almost hit anything, including 50 Cent. He could hit that too. Ronnie Dolan, you probably saw that opening pitch, didn't you?
I did see
that. That dude's bad.
That is fantastic. According to MLB.com, look what they have here as far as top prospects. We didn't even touch on Chris Bryant yet, who may have the most power of all the guys we've discussed. But in addition to this, I think we know that a lot of what they need takes place on the mound. I mean, what are we looking at here? This is not a team that is pitching rich right now.
No, I mean, that is really where they have to go out and get some starting pitching. They don't have anyone really. You saw Kyle Hendricks last year had a pretty good year. Travis Wood and Edwin Jackson both struggled. They need to get some arms, guys who can pitch 200 innings plus. And until they do that, I think they're going to be in trouble. But when you pay a manager $5 million, I think you got to make some other investments also.
And when you think about there's a lefty and a righty out there, one's Scherzer, one's Lester, are they possibly in the market? And I agree with you, Ron. If you're willing to throw the $5.25 out there for your manager, these two guys probably perked up a little bit, wouldn't you think, when you're thinking about Lester and Scherzer?
That's a commitment to the future, there's no doubt. I mean, 25 for a manager, what does that mean for Max Scherzer, Ron?
Well, Max Scherzer wants to break the bank. I mean, that's where he's at. That's why he turned down $150 million from the Tigers to try to test the market. He wants to go out there and get one of those Clayton Kershaw kind of contracts. That's what he felt like he has done so far in baseball, and it's be hard to argue with the numbers he's put up the last 2 years.
Yeah, and it would be fun, too, right? Scherzer's a St. Louis kid. Maybe he goes back to St. Louis a bunch of times playing in the NL Central.
Manager of the Chicago Cubs, Joe Maddon.
They came on down. We kind of sat behind the Cousin Eddie. That's our RV, the Cousin Eddie 43-foot Winnebago. It was kind of a nice evening. It was really, like, the sun was setting really well. It was getting kind of cool. Theo needed a jacket. Jay ran in for a couple more beers. Where's the bartender? Bartender here? Barkeep? Anywhere? I got the drinks right now. That's a shot and a beer. That's the Hazelton way. Shot and a beer.
Joining us now from Chicago, the newest manager of the Chicago Cubs, Joe Maddon. Before we get into hardcore baseball, what is Cousin Eddie and why is it important to this story?
Cousin Eddie is our new 43-foot Winnebago RV. It's important to the story because Cousin Eddie from the Christmas Vacation movie with Chevy Chase, etc. I met with Theo and Jed in the Cousin Eddie near Pensacola, Florida, about a week ago. So that's where the relevancy is.
Joe, I liked your words about the autocratic manager days are done. You need that synergy between the manager and the front office. You think you have it here in Chicago?
I totally believe that. I mean, I've known Theo for a bit, you know, back in the days when I originally interviewed for the Red Sox job about 10 years ago. We hit it off great back then, and I knew that when we talked the other day, nothing had changed. Knowing that we're working with Andrew for so many years also, it's really important to have that synergy between front office and what's going on in the field in the clubhouse. It's just not going to work otherwise. So I really felt strongly and comfortable with Theo in that regard, and Jed. So moving forward, I just think, I know I'm talking about it here in Chicago, but I think every other organization, every other team is going to have to move in that direction if they're not there already.
Hey, Joe, certainly being familiar, extremely familiar with the American League East and the rest of the American League, only seeing the Cubs, I guess, through highlights and bits and pieces through interleague, this is a new story for you going into spring training, basically with a blank slate.
You're exactly right. We saw them this year for 3 games. The Rays came up here and played them for 3, and they were very impressive. I had heard, you know, you read stuff, you hear stuff like you said, I'll occasionally watch it on TV. But watching them on the field this year, I was really impressed with a lot of their young talent. I got to meet Mr. Ricketts last night, wonderful owner. I'm looking at all the plans regarding the rebirth of Wrigley Field. What's going to happen over the next 4 years is spectacular. So there's so much positive energy going on right here right now. I know that the fans still are hearing the refrain about being a little bit more patient and being late to the party. I kind of understand all that. I'm going to have to be brought up to speed with that regarding the feelings of the fans over the next couple months or years. But so many good things, so many exciting things, and it starts at the top. Always starts at the top, and I've been really impressed with the Ricketts family and how they've treated me, and looking at the plans moving forward for the Cubs.
Yeah, you mentioned some of those young players that they have. Without playing a favorite already, is there any one of them that jumps out at you on the highlight reel that you really want to see in spring training?
Well, I mean, obviously we played him. Rizzo was really good. He had a ball against us, against the Rays here to right center that I thought was going to be across the street. And, of course, the wind was blowing in that day, but I just watched the way he played. The way he played was really spectacular in the sense that he was really into it. I could see the high accountability level, all the things that I've read that he has said. He's just a different animal, so I think he kind of exemplifies what the Cubs are going to be like over the next couple of years.
You know, Joe, you had such a great coaching staff in Tampa Bay, just about the same coaching staff the entire time. That's definitely going to change. What's the most important thing for you when you look at a coach and what you need him to do?
Well, probably the most important part is his ability to communicate with with players and young players. Everybody's always looking for the guy that's like the best mechanical hitting coach or the best mechanical pitching coach, whatever. But I like guys that are able to be good at that stuff, but they can really connect with the players. The players need that connection. They need somebody that they could talk to on a more consistent basis, somebody that's gonna call them or hold them accountable for the bad moments. I like good relationships with the players. I think that's paramount. And then, of course, the ability to teach the game, the X's and O's part.
Hey, Joe, a report surfaced on Monday that indicated that perhaps you went back to the Rays and said, hey, listen, I'll stay. You know, let's try to work something out. Tell us if that's true and how that went down, the actual parting of the ways.
No, but what happened was once Andrew left, I was able to opt out of my contract. And I didn't even know that until I was driving Cousin Eddie down Virginia, right around Emporia, Virginia. I found out that I had this ability to opt out. So I had to look at the whole thing and read it over and understand exactly what that meant. There was a 2-week window right there. I didn't know anything about this. Honestly, I did not. Once I was able to ascertain exactly what it meant, we did negotiate with the Rays a bit, but then I was getting to the point where I was running out of time, and I thought it was important for me and my family at this particular juncture in my baseball career and in my life to opt out and see what other potential investment or opportunities might be out there. So as I found out, there was more than I had thought. Opportunities came from different directions, different kinds of jobs, very, very flattering kind of stuff. I really challenge anybody to be placed in the same situation, that, especially as a coach or manager, they wouldn't have done the same thing.
Playoff expectations. I know you mentioned it in the press conference. Refresh us as to what yours are.
Every year to go to the playoffs and then beyond. I'm not going to back off on that. I think if you start settling in your expectations, the threat is that you're going to hit that mark and never get there. So going into spring training, I promise you, I'm going to be talking playoffs and World Series with our guys from day one. I mean that sincerely. I know maybe for some people it may not be realistic, but I don't know our players well enough yet to know that it's not. So I'm going to go in there talking that talk. I'm going to believe what I'm saying, and then it's up to me, managerially speaking, and as the coaching staff, to sell our players on this and have them really adopt our methods and really start to understand one another. So I promise you, first day, that's going to be the majority of the speeches or the talk's going to be about playoffs and World Series.
Joe Maddon, manager of the Chicago Cubs. Thank you, congratulations, and we'll see you soon for sure.
Thanks for having us on. Appreciate it, guys.
I'm not going to let this go. It's Cousin Eddie. Don't know why they call this hamburger helper, guys. It does just fine by itself. Theo Epstein couldn't do it all by himself. In fact, he hired the guy he interviewed more than a decade ago when he was with the Red Sox.
It was great to reconnect with Joe, and I think we are philosophically aligned, you know, that open-mindedness. He's not afraid to make a decision. He's not afraid to incorporate all the information. He believes in players. He likes players. He connects with players. He's aggressive. He's got a great old-school baseball sensibility. And then just his personality is infectious. You know, it's intellectual curiosity and optimism. And I think he lifts the level of those around him. So it was a great fit.
Theo Epstein. His long line of credentials include hiring Joe Maddon as the 54th manager in Cubs history. We'll see how that plays out over the next few years. He was named Cubs president of baseball ops in October of 2011. Last 3 seasons, under 500 and 5th in the NL Central each year. They hope the best is yet to come.
It's Monday, November 3rd, and here are your hosts, Chris Rose and Kevin Millar.
That's right. It is off-season intentional talk presented to you by the United States Marine Corps with 1-5 and Rose, and happy off-season, bud.
Well, I tell you what's nice. I know you had a chance to kind of work and keep working, but I got home, it was like, wow, that travel?
Yeah.
I don't care where it is. It doesn't matter if you're coming off vacation. It doesn't matter if you're coming off work. It's nice to always get back to your pillows and your bed.
Yeah, it wears on you a little bit, but now we got a whole off season. It should be a ton of fun. You're going to see a ton of trades, free agent movement, guys maybe getting waived when you didn't expect it. So lots to talk about, even though it's still the off season. In fact, let's get it going with the world-renowned showbiz, Joe Maddon, on the move from St. Petersburg to the Windy City. 2-time AL Manager of the Year, 4 postseason appearances with the Rays, gets 5 years, roughly $25 million. To help the Cubs win the World Series for the first time since 1908. How are you going to do it?
We could sit here and talk mechanics, hitting mechanics, base running, whatever you want. But it really comes down to personal relationships and trust. And because what happens then, when you get to that point, now you could really have constructive criticism flowing back and forth. And when you get to that point, that's where really good things can occur. Because you have to have thick skin to play this game. You cannot be thin-skinned and play this game and be successful. So those are the kind of things I glom onto. So going into the spring training, I'll promise you I'll sit down for a bit before I address the team for the first time. But it's going to be very similar to what we're talking about right now. And once we establish trust and you open these lines of communication, anything is possible.
Jim. Well, I'll tell you what now, just listening to him, you have that trust. You understand that you have to have that when you're running a type of team. And the Rays for many years had that with him. But constructive criticism, Chris, that's the number one thing I got out of that. Constructive criticism, knowing how to establish a verbal attack without it being a fight. Without you saying, hey, Rose, bust your butt to first, let's go. You slacked. It doesn't mean a fist fight. And I think that was so important, what Joe Maddon said right there at that press conference, knowing how to get a clubhouse to agree to it.
Kevin, I'm going to go out on a limb here. I'm not going to say that he's going to help them win the World Series because God knows it's been 106 years, and so I don't know if that's going to happen. But I honestly believe he could be on par with Mike Ditka and Phil Jackson in that city in terms of sports leadership, because we live in a little cocoon here at MLB Network and in our baseball world. We all know about Joe Maddon and the hocus pocus that he's done down in St. Petersburg for the last nearly decade. When you get to a media market the size of Chicago and a franchise like the Cubs, it takes on a different life of its own. And I guarantee you, if you read all the papers on Tuesday out of Chicago, people are going to be mesmerized by Joe Maddon and the gospel that he's out there spilling right now. I honestly believe he's going to turn this franchise, put it on a different tact. I don't know if they're going to win 90 games next year. I don't know when they're going to make it to the World Series. But I honestly believe in him. I'm buying whatever he's selling, and I think that he is the type of leader that can turn this thing on its head.
No, and you make a great point there, Chris. And let me tell you, I'm going to go one step further. We have forgotten a tad about Theo Epstein because of the struggles when you come over and take over a franchise that is basically in the dumps, minor league farm system-wise. And I remember Theo telling me it takes time to draft. Every June 1st comes around, we have to draft. So each year we build this minor league system. And don't sleep on his intelligence of the feel of this game for front office wise. And now you put Joe Maddon, it's a lot like the Andrew Friedman situation. Joe Maddon gets a lot of credit. Andrew Friedman sat behind the scenes in Tampa and drafted these players like Price and drafted Matt Garza and got Evan Longoria and had these Shields and Scott Kazimier's there. And that's what you do is you build a farm system with the Uptons and stuff. So I'm just telling you right now, you're exactly right. You're onto something. This is going to be a nice combination, and hopefully they work well together and turn this thing around.
One other quick note. This is a perfect fit because not all jobs are a perfect fit for Joe Maddon. If he goes into a veteran clubhouse, some of the, I'm not going to call them shenanigans, but he likes to think outside the box, bringing pets into the clubhouse and disco balls. That's not going to work with every team. But it's good. It worked with young guys like Longoria and Price and Shields and Zobrist, and they all bought in. Well, what do they have in that Cubs clubhouse right now? Everybody's under the age of 25. They don't have a choice but to follow his leadership here. So I think it's going to work perfectly.
Yeah, you grasp for that leadership as a young player.
Yep.
That's the problem when Hanley Ramirez and guys like that with Florida. They have 3 years service time, but all of a sudden everybody's out there and they're the veteran on the club. Then you create this monster, right? Then you have the Dan Uglin scene that got him, just using an example. So, yes, you need the leadership coming from that boss man, which is ultimately your manager, and you become a reflection of that club. Period, of your manager. That club becomes a reflection of your manager. So I agree with you. It's going to be fun to watch, and hopefully that's this north side of Chicago has some exciting days ahead of them. Yeah.
All right, there's a sidebar to this story as well. I read a few reports out there that there are some anonymous sources among major league managers that are saying they're disappointed that Joe Maddon opted out of his contract and basically shoved away a good baseball man in Rick Renteria, led the Cubs to 73 wins in his first and only season there on the north side of town. Do you feel like he undercut Rick Renteria at all?
No, not at all. This is the business of the game, and I think ultimately Joe Maddon's worrying about Joe Maddon and his family, and he opted out because he was definitely underpaid in that $1.8 million salary in Tampa. And you got guys like he's a bench coach, and Mike Scioscia, who has making $5 million a year, signed a 10-year, $50 million deal, seen for a manager, the largest ever. What I'm trying to say, Renteria, tremendous man, tremendous manager. It wasn't done here, but Joe Maddon becomes available. Guess what? This is the business part, and hey, Theo and the boys flew out there and told this to Renteria, and it's a painful thing, but you know what? Joe Maddon did the right thing for himself and his family.
Two things. If you're going to go and be a source anonymously, you don't deserve to be a major league manager, in my opinion, because that means you're going behind somebody's back. And the other thing is, because their point was, well, they ruined Rick Renteria. He might have ruined Rick Renteria's dream and maybe his one and only shot. Well, hold on here. How many times do we see there's a middle reliever who finally gets called up to the show? He's 28 years old. He finally gets that cup of coffee. He's on your roster for 3 weeks. And, oh, by the way, somebody has to get activated and we have to drop you from our 40-man roster. That might have been his one and only shot. You might have ruined his dream. And guess what? That's part of the baseball world. Now because it's happening to one of the guys that's an equal to you, all of a sudden Joe Maddon's wrong? I ain't buying it. Ain't buying it. Sorry. Let's move on.
You know what? I'm a good skier. I'm a bad jumper. Just a bad jumper, Chris.
I've never been skiing in my entire life. I was supposed to go for Konda Kahari's second grade birthday. We got rained out in Cleveland, Ohio. Killed my Olympic dream right there.
Shame on you.
Yep. Time right now for Kevin's Highlights presented to you by Axe Hair. Best of Joe Maddon down in Tampa. Start with the craziness in the clubhouse.
Yeah, we talk about clubhouse chemistry, Chris. This is really clubhouse chemistry or trusticity, whatever word I could use with trust. Because we got weird animals and snakes, and dancing's not bad. I like the rhythm.
How about the outfits over the years?
Awesomeness. I mean, this is awesomeness. This is, I think, where Joe Maddon really made a mark. It's not World Series championships. It's this stuff right here, letting the boys be boys and tremendously athletic on the track of Fenway. Look at this, Chris. Wow.
That's pretty good. Best doppelganger ever.
Yeah, I think we're going to see him in Chicago, no doubt. It is by far the closest we've seen. There's lookalikes, but those are twins.
Hey, on the south side of Chicago, he lost his temper.
Yeah, he's throwing everybody out. And you don't see this with Joe. He's a lovable guy, glass of red wine. But yes, you're out, you're out. And you know what? Everybody's out of here. No wine for you or no, I'm not sharing. I'm mad.
Much more pleasant mood after this win.
Yes, he's got some rhythm here. Rays win. He has Escobar and him go up. Little smack to 5. Milongo, we'll get you next.
And then finally, time for your close-up.
Uncomfortable time. This is an uncomfortable fan moment right here. And Matt's got a cup of coffee, doing a nice job of just ignoring him. No fish eyes.
Hey, there is no more patriotic sport than baseball. But sometimes a performance falls a little flat. See why in the latest edition of...
Got him!
Kevin's Highlights is presented by Axe Hair, the easy way to superior styling. Intentional Talk is presented by the United States Marine Corps, the few, the proud, the Marines. Now it's time for That Was Awkward.
So us and the fans can take a look at it. And hold on. Hey, no, you're not pulling up in front of our live shop. Back up now. No! Unbelievable. You got to be kidding me. This is unbelievable. Gosh, you know, of all the times you could be doing this, I'm sorry. That's just so annoying.
That was awkward.
What was he waiting for?
Bro, I don't know, but the TV guys, they get angry and they get
angry.
Yeah.
You haven't learned that in the 4 years in the business? We're crazy. We're crazy.
I'm learning. Yep.
All right.
You're right.
Time right now for the latest edition of...
Kachim! Or, Rose, should I say, Kachim. Great rendition of our God Bless America. Hands up! It's wobbly, wobbly boots. Shim, amazing. Goodness gracious.
Wait a second. Was that the World Series or the Stanley Cup final? I mean,
yeah,
she's slipping all over.
Yeah, it looked like there's ice in the batter's box, but no batter's box were injured, Chris.
All right, we're back at it again Tuesday, 3 o'clock Eastern. Hey, it's only a half hour in the offseason, truncated as Millar likes to say.
Quick.
But we still pack a little punch. That's right.
Quick.
We'll see you Tuesday, 3 Eastern.